A lie need not be believed to wound. Sometimes it is enough that men enjoy repeating it. Close quote. Snow had been falling over Queen's Landing since before sunset, not heavily enough to halt the work within the fortress, but steadily enough to soften every edge of the ancient dwarven stone. By midnight, the repaired roofs wore white crowns. The Garden of Spears had become a forest of pale shafts beneath the moonless sky, and the great western gate disappeared whenever the wind drove curtains of snow across the courtyard. Queen's Landing was alive now in ways it had not been when Leonard Echo's army first reclaimed it. Chimneys smoked above repaired houses, livestock slept behind newly raised fences, grain-filled portions of the old dwarven storehouses, and the smell of bread sometimes reached the walls before dawn. Yet the fortress remained a military settlement as much as a town, and on nights such as this, its guards still watched the darkness beyond Danham Valley, with the suspicion of men who had learned that peace was merely the interval during which an enemy had not yet appeared. At a guard post built against the northern wall, 2 Whitehaven soldiers sat beside a brazier whose iron bowl had cracked during the battle and been repaired with ugly bands of black steel. The post was little more than a stone alcove beneath the rampart, roofed with salvaged timber and enclosed on 3 sides against the wind. A narrow opening looked toward the northern road, although there was little to see beyond the reach of the fire. A few fence posts, the dark suggestion of the lower fields, and then nothing but snow. The older of the 2 soldiers was Sergeant Edric Van, a broad-faced veteran whose left ear had been split by an elven blade during the battle. The younger was Tommen Gray, a Whitehaven spearman who had survived the Western Breach and had since acquired the dangerous confidence of a man who believed surviving one impossible thing made him difficult to kill. Edric held his hands toward the brazier. They should have been back before dark. Tommen took a drink from the clay bottle between them. Perhaps the hunt was better than expected. The weather was worse than expected. That too. Edric looked through the opening again. The hunting party came back without them. That is the part I do not like. Tommen offered him the bottle, but Edric shook his head. They said the Queen and the Squire crossed the ridge before the storm came down. So I heard. Then stop smiling. I am not smiling. You are. Tommen drank again. Beyond the shelter, boots scraped against the stone stairs. A Skoldvidarian warrior descended from the upper watch, carrying a bundle of split wood beneath one arm. Neither Whitehaven soldier paid him much attention. Hakon Styr had been assigned to the northern wall for several weeks and had shared enough watches with Whitehaven men that his presence no longer interrupted conversation. He was in his late 30s, powerfully built, with an old burn running from the edge of his jaw toward his ear. He had been a young shieldman when Skoldvidar fell 18 years earlier and had followed Hestia's banners again when she returned to war. He placed the wood beside the brazier, took the empty seat near the rear wall, and began sharpening a utility knife against a whetstone. Tommen glanced toward him. Your queen knows those mountains, doesn't she? Hakon continued sharpening. Better than you. That would not be difficult. Edric gave Tommen a warning look. Leave him alone. I am asking a question. You never ask questions. You arrange insults so they end with question marks. Hakon almost smiled at that, although his eyes remained on the knife. Tommen leaned closer to the fire. They went hunting with 6 people. 6 people came back? 4, Edric corrected. 4 came back. 2 turned around earlier. And the Queen of Skoldvidar somehow ends up alone beyond the ridge with her squire. Edric's expression changed. Do not. Tommen looked genuinely innocent. Do not what? You know exactly what. Hakon's whetstone continued moving along the blade. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Tommen lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent the Skoldvidarian from hearing. I am only saying it is fortunate she had someone to keep her warm. Edric stared at him. You are drunk. I am cold. You are both. Probably. Edric reached for the bottle and moved it out of Tommen's reach. You have had enough. Tommen laughed quietly. You cannot tell me nobody has wondered. I can tell you that decent men know when wondering should remain inside their skulls. Decent men are boring. Hakon stopped sharpening. The silence lasted only a moment before the wind struck the outer wall hard enough to make the timber roof groan. Tommen looked toward the Skoldvidarian and saw that he was listening. Instead of becoming cautious, he seemed amused. "What?" he asked. "You never wondered?" Hakon set the whetstone beside him. "About what?" "Your queen and her little shadow." Edric swore beneath his breath. Hakon's face did not move. "Mariasek is her squire. I know what he is called. He serves her." Tommen smiled. "That is what I said." Edric stood. "Tommen." The younger soldier ignored him. "He follows her everywhere, carries her messages, tends her horse, carries her lance, stands outside her chambers, goes hunting with her." Tommen tilted his head. "Very devoted boy." "He is a man of 21, Hakon said. Tommen's smile widened. "That makes it less innocent, not more." Edric seized Tommen by the shoulder. "Enough." Tommen shrugged him away. "Gods, Edric, listen to yourself. We spent months with them. Everyone saw it. The boy looks at her as if she were the last woman alive, and she keeps him close enough that half the fortress thinks he is attached to her cloak." "That is enough," Hakon said. His voice had changed. Tommen heard it. So did Edric. The older Whitehaven soldier stepped between them. "It ends here." For several breaths, no one spoke. The fire popped inside the brazier, throwing sparks upward. Hakon remained seated, but the muscles along his jaw had tightened. Tommen watched him across Edric's shoulder and seemed to decide that the Skoldvidarian's anger was entertaining. Then he made the mistake that killed him. "Maybe that is why they wanted the storm," Tommen said. "No guards, no old men following them, no court watching. Just a queen and a young man finding somewhere warm until morning." Hakon rose. Edric placed one hand against his chest. "Sit down." Tommen laughed. "What? You think she spent the whole night praying?" Hakon looked past Edric. "Take it back." Tommen's amusement began turning into anger of his own. "I owe you nothing." "You will take it back." "Or what?" "You know nothing of her." "I know she disappeared with him." "You know there was a storm." "I know what men do with women when nobody is watching." Edric struck Tommen across the chest with the back of his hand, more reprimand than blow. "Shut your mouth." Tommen pushed him away. "I am tired of pretending queens stop being women because someone puts a crown on them. She has eyes. The boy has eyes. Maybe Skoldvidar calls it loyalty when a queen beds her squire, but in Whitehaven we have another word for it." Hakon crossed the space between them. Edric barely caught him. The two men collided against the wall, scattering firewood across the floor. Tommen stumbled backward, surprised by how quickly the Skoldvidarian had moved, and then anger replaced surprise. Hakon tore free from Edric's grasp and struck Tommen across the mouth. The Whitehaven soldier crashed against the table, sending cups and a wooden plate onto the stones. Two more guards came running down the stairs. "What in the hells?" Tommen came up bleeding. "You northern bastard!" He reached for his sword. Hakon already had the knife. The blade entered Tommen beneath the ribs. For a heartbeat, the violence ceased so completely that the storm outside seemed impossibly loud. Hakon's hand remained around the knife. Tommen looked down at it. His mouth opened, but whatever he intended to say emerged only as a wet breath. Hakon released the weapon. Tommen staggered backward into Edric's arms, and the sergeant lowered him desperately toward the floor. "Alenia!" Edric roared. "Get Alenia!" One of the guards ran. Hakon did not. He stood beside the brazier, staring at the blood on his hand, as though it belonged to somebody else. By the time Sister Alenia reached Northwatch, Tommen Gray was dead. Leonard arrived moments behind her with Lord Theomond Risewell, while George followed at a pace that made it clear he had ignored at least 3 different instructions regarding his ribs. Whitepaw appeared shortly afterward, filling the doorway so completely that one of the guards had to move aside. Lady Vera Thorne arrived last among them, having been summoned because the killer was Skoldvidarian. She entered expecting some dispute between soldiers and stopped when she saw the body. Alenia remained kneeling beside Tommen. "He is gone." Theomond's face became stone. He knew the young soldier. Not well, perhaps, but well enough. "Tommen Gray," he said. Edric nodded. "3rd Company, Western Breach." "Yes, my lord." Theomond looked toward Hakon. The Skoldvidarian had allowed himself to be disarmed. His wrists were bound now, though nobody had struck him or forced him to his knees. Leonard surveyed the room. "Who saw it?" "I did," Edric said. "So did I," said one of the guards who had reached the bottom of the stairs before the stabbing. Leonard looked at Edric. "Tell us everything." Edric hesitated. "Everything," Leonard repeated. So Edric told them. The embarrassment of repeating Tommen's words in front of Vera was obvious, but he omitted nothing. He described the conversation about the hunting party, the remarks about Mariasek, the suggestion that Hestia had deliberately remained alone with her squire, and the increasingly crude insinuations about what the two of them might be doing beyond the ridge. George's expression darkened long before Edric finished. Whitepaw made a low sound in his throat. Vera said nothing. That was more alarming than anger. When Edric reached the stabbing, Theomond interrupted. Did Tommen strike him first? No. Did Tommen draw his sword? He reached for it after Hakon struck him. Was the sword drawn? Perhaps a hand's width. Theomond looked toward Hakon. And you stabbed him. Hakon lifted his head. He spoke filth about my queen. That was not my question. Yes, Vera finally spoke. What exactly did Gray say? Vera, Leonard warned. I want to hear it. Edric looked uncomfortable. Hakon answered for him. He said Queen Hestia was committing adultery with her squire. He implied it, Edric said. He meant it. Vera's eyes hardened. Theomond noticed. So because you decided what another man meant, he said, you killed one of mine. Hakon turned toward him. Would you stand quietly while a drunken soldier called High Queen Renoria an adulteress? The question struck precisely where Hakon intended. Theomond stepped forward. Leonard moved slightly between them. The Whitehaven lord stopped. No, Theomond said, I would have him arrested. Hakon's expression carried contempt. Then perhaps that is the difference between Whitehaven and Skoldvidar. Theomond stared at him for a long moment. Yes, he said. Tonight it is. They did not wait for Hestia to return. That decision belonged to Leonard. Vera opposed him immediately when he ordered Hakon imprisoned pending judgment. He is one of Hestia's sworn men. She should be present. A Whitehaven soldier lies dead, and the insult concerned my queen. The crime does not. It began with the insult. Leonard looked at her. No, the argument began with the insult. The crime began when Hakon chose the knife. Vera's anger remained, but she did not challenge him again. Galen Veramore was summoned before dawn because Leonard wanted a lord without allegiance to either Whitehaven or Skoldvidar present when testimony was taken. Elendir Marinor joined them soon afterward, silent through most of the proceedings, while Vandross remained near one of the ruined windows listening to men argue over honor, as though he had heard the argument in 100 different kingdoms. The old War Council chamber had changed since the rebuilding began. Maps of enemy formations had been replaced by plans for granaries, drainage channels, and repaired walls, but that morning those papers were pushed aside and the stone table became a tribunal. Hakon was brought before them. Theomond stood rather than sat. Galen occupied the opposite side of the table with his arms folded. Vera stood behind Hakon. Leonard questioned the witnesses separately. Their accounts differed in small details, but not in substance. Tommen had spoken crudely about Hestia and Mariasek. Hakon had demanded he stop. Tommen had continued. Hakon had struck him. Tommen had reached for his sword. Hakon had stabbed him before the weapon cleared its scabbard. When the last witness departed, Galen rubbed one hand across his face. One man was a fool, he said. The other became a murderer. Vera looked at him. Gray dishonored a queen. He did. He dishonored Skoldvidar. He did. He spoke of her like a camp whore. Galen's eyes hardened. And now he is dead. Does that improve Hestia's honor? Vera did not answer. Elendir spoke quietly from beside the window. An insult can be punished without becoming a grave. Hakon looked toward him. Easy words from an elf whose queen was not named. No, Elendir replied. Easy words would be telling you that anger made you innocent. The room became quiet. Theomond looked at Leonard. I claim judgment. Vera immediately stiffened. Leonard considered him. Theomond continued. Gray served under my banner. He died at a Whitehaven post while on Whitehaven watch. I will not pretend his words were acceptable, and I will not allow his death to transform him into something better than he was. Had he lived, I would have stripped him of rank and punished him publicly. And Hakon? Leonard asked. Theomond looked toward the Skoldvidarian. He murdered a soldier under my command. Vera stepped forward. If you execute him while Hestia is missing. Theomond turned toward her. I am not executing him because Hestia is missing. I am executing him because Tommen Gray is dead. Hakon laughed once. It was without humor. You would kill me for defending my queen. Theomond walked around the table until only a few feet separated them. No, I would kill you because you stabbed a man for words. He reached for his sword after you attacked him. He deserved worse. That answer settled the matter more completely than any argument could have. Galen looked down. Vera closed her eyes briefly. Leonard watched Hakon. Do you regret killing him? Hakon considered the question. No. Theamon nodded once. Then I have my judgment. The execution took place that afternoon beneath the northern wall where the killing had occurred. Leonard refused to turn it into spectacle. There were no drums, no heralds, and no assembled crowd beyond those whose presence mattered. Whitehaven soldiers from Tommen's company stood beneath one side of the wall. A smaller group of Skuld Vidarians stood opposite them, Vera among their number. Galen attended as witness. Ellendir stood farther back with Vandros, while George and Whitepaw remained near the steps leading from the courtyard. Snow fell gently now. The storm had weakened, but the mountains remained hidden. Hakon was led into the courtyard without armor. His hands were bound before him. He walked upright and showed no fear. Theamond waited beside a low block of dark dwarven stone. He had chosen to perform the sentence himself. A Whitehaven knight offered him an executioner's axe, but Theamond refused it. Instead, he drew his own sword. Hakon stopped before him. Theamond spoke loudly enough for both groups of soldiers to hear. Tommen Grey disgraced his uniform before he died. His words were vulgar, dishonorable, and unworthy of a Whitehaven soldier. His death does not cleanse them. Several Whitehaven men lowered their eyes. Theamond continued. But no soldier beneath these walls may kill another because he hates what that man has said. If insult becomes permission for murder, then banners mean nothing, commanders mean nothing, and law means nothing. We did not rebuild Queen's Landing, so every man could carry his own kingdom at the point of a knife. Hakon looked toward Vera. She did not look away. Do you have final words? Theamond asked. Hakon breathed deeply. I served Skuld Vidar before its fall. I watched men mock us while our halls burned. I watched our king die. I watched our queen lose everything. I will not apologize for loving what remains. Vera's face tightened. Theamond answered quietly. No one asked you to. For the first time, Hakon seemed uncertain. Theamond lowered the sword slightly. You were asked to obey the law of the fortress you helped reclaim. Hakon looked down. Perhaps something in that distinction finally reached him. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Then bury me as a Skuld Vidarian. Vera answered from among his countrymen. You will be. Hakon nodded. He knelt. Theamond waited until the courtyard was completely still. Then he carried out the sentence with a single stroke. No one celebrated. Vera remained where she stood while Hakon's body was covered. The Whitehaven soldiers did the same. For several uncomfortable moments, the two groups faced one another across the courtyard, separated by no more than a stretch of snow upon which men from both kingdoms had walked 1,000 times during the rebuilding. George finally descended the steps. He approached Edric, who had been standing among Tommen's company, and handed him the dead soldier's belt and gloves. His things, George said. Edric accepted them. George looked toward the covered body of Hakon, and then toward the place where Tommen had died the night before. 2 men, he murmured, 1 mouth and 1 knife. Between them, they managed to make 2 graves. Whitepaw stood beside him. That is stupid. George looked up at the worgen. Yes. Whitepaw's ears lowered slightly. George rested his hand against the worgen's arm. Most terrible things are when you finally get close enough to look at them. By evening, Tommen Grey's body had been prepared according to Whitehaven custom. Hakon Styr was washed and wrapped by Skuld Vidarian hands, exactly as Vera had promised. Neither man was buried as a hero, and neither was denied the dignity owed to the dead. At Northwatch, Sergeant Edric returned to duty. The blood had been scrubbed from the stones, although a dark stain remained in the cracks beside the brazier. Someone replaced the overturned bench. Someone brought fresh firewood. The clay bottle had disappeared. Edric sat alone for most of the first watch. Near midnight, a young Skuld Vidarian soldier arrived to relieve one of the sentries. He hesitated at the entrance when he saw the Whitehaven sergeant. Edric looked at the empty seat opposite him. Cold out there? The Skuld Vidarian nodded. Then sit. The young man did. For a while, neither spoke. They listened to the fire and the wind moving over Queen's Landing's walls. Outside the guard post, the road remained hidden beneath snow, and no rider appeared upon it before the watch changed. Inside, 2 soldiers from 2 wounded kingdoms shared the same fire. Neither mentioned Hestia, neither mentioned Mariasek, neither mentioned Tommen Gray or Håkon Styr. For that night, there had already been enough words.